aesthetic judgments presented as absolute turn out to be strongly conditioned or even determined by considerations of social and economic class. Why then do we continue to think and write and teach so much of the time as though we didn't know this? As though, that is, the superiority of brushwork-oriented painting in the literati styles over the more pictorial kinds of painting I've shown were a central truth about Chinese painting beyond questioning, to be taught to our students and thus perpetuated as a piece of eternal wisdom. I hope that the publication of my book will go some way toward changing that situation, and that I will still be around to watch it change. Thank you. That ends this passage from my material culture talk. Now back to our pictorial Handscrolls. Next, please. The other one, and the last painting we'll see in this lecture, is devoted to a tour of the busy shops and entertainment district once located at the base of the Tiger Hill outside Suzhou. It's a long scroll painted in ink and colors on silk, from which I have only a series of sections and details, no full coverage, that is. When I saw it, it was owned by Andrew Franklin. Next, please. A career diplomat who had been the British consul in Taipei during the 1950s and was now living in retirement on the outskirts of London. I visited him to see and photograph some leaves he owned from the series of Jinping Mei illustrations that I spoke about earlier, which I believe to be the work of Gu Jianlong. How a group of the Jinping Mei illustrations came on the market cheap in Taipei so that he could buy them is a long story that I tell elsewhere. When we were finished with these, he brought out more pieces from his painting collection to show me, and this handscroll was among them. It's now in the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery. After Franklin's death, his heirs gave much of his collection to them in lieu of taxes, as the catalog puts it. The remainder was auctioned off in South Kensington, and this photo of him and his wife is from this auction catalog. I've tried to get a set of photos of the entire scroll from the Birmingham Museum, but they have either answered that it hasn't been photographed yet, and they are very busy, or they haven't responded at all. So, details only for now. But someone should persist, maybe even go to Birmingham and pound on a desk. Next, please. The scroll opens with a procession of mounted men wearing the kind of red-top caps that, as we saw in the canal scroll, may indicate some official status. Accompanied by their servants, they ride along while turning their faces toward us. They are clearly portrait faces, representing real people who took part in the real event. As we learn from an accompanying inscription, and alas, I've lost my slide of that, it's a farewell party given for a certain Su Dingyuan. The inscription reads in part, Mr. Su Dingyuan has administered Jiangsu for 5 years. Mr. Lao invited him on a spring outing to the eastern suburbs and commissioned a painter, Hua Shi, to make this picture. Starting at Duya, it portrays the neighborhood of Tiger Hill with its environs. All the assembled people had a good time, as if they were climbing the spring terrace. When I saw the painting, I gave it the title, Spring Pleasures at Tiger Hill, and added the poem, and then the poem follows. And he ends with, Modes the year of the Qianlong era, that is 1768, inscribed by Zhao Xiuqian. The terms that's used for the artist, Hua Shi, means something like artisan painter, and it indicates the low esteem in which he was held. They didn't even trouble to record his name. The artist, like the artists of the other scrolls in the album we've seen, he must have specialized in pictures of this kind, depicting familiar materials in most of his scroll, filling in a few narrative bits for this special assignment. It's obvious that he's not a good painter of horses. He may have employed a local portrait specialist to sketch the participants during the party and then paint in their faces in the opening passage. That, too, is a low calling. It must have been like having your photos taken in a carnival booth. Now we're going on. Next. I meant to reproduce in my book for comparison, but somehow didn't, this opening section of a scroll in the Metropolitan Museum, one of the imperial series showing the Qianlong Emperor's visit to Suzhou. The Met's curator, Mike Hearn, has written a good article about these. Again, the emperor is made the central figure by portraying him larger and the only one facing directly outward, a convention that's now familiar to us. The portrayal of all the other figures and of their setting is stiff and conventional. Nothing can distract attention from the imperial figure. Next. The rest of the scroll is the same. Conventional figures, only conventional portrayal of the shops on the Suzhou streets. As I remark in the book, the artist of such a scroll wouldn't presume to introduce entertaining genre details into a work intended for the imperial gaze. Next, please. This is a section of a similar scroll in the Liaoning Museum, also recording an imperial visit to Suzhou, by the same artist or group of artists as the Met scroll. In the upper right is exactly the entertainment district that our low-class scroll is devoted to. But again, it's too staid to offend the imperial gaze with trivialities. Scrolls such as these two are treasures, much sought after and very expensive when they come on the market. Franklin, on the other hand, must have bought his scroll for maybe the price of a good banquet in Taipei. Next. Here are two passages from the Franklin scroll, very different indeed from the imperial ones, full of narrative and incident and observation. A passage near the beginning at right, one that's near the end at left. In the latter, near the end, we see the place toward which the procession is headed, where the principals will enter one of the canal boats, seen below, and enjoy the drinking and entertainment that's prepared for them. On the street above them is a kind of welcoming party waiting, an old woman and man who may be relatives, the old woman holding by the hand a child who turns to look up at a younger woman, perhaps its mother, who is holding a baby. Further back, a group of men with red hats, one of them ogling the women through a lens. Lenses of this kind were common in China by this time, and they are often seen in paintings. The other section, near the beginning of the scroll on the right, shows some outrunners of Su Dingran's procession who have gone ahead of them to clear the way. They carry signs proclaiming their importance, and they turn toward each other, not paying much attention to the attractions they are passing. They may know those already. Next. But our attention is drawn to what is behind them, an antique shop depicted in fine detail. This is the kind of local color that our anonymous artist has mastered through portraying it many times, an accomplishment for which he gets no credit in the elite Chinese system of values. And it gives us a unique view of what kinds of objects these shops featured in this time and place. Historians have used woodblock illustrations in books for information of this kind, but these woodblock pictures are colorless, linear, and more schematic. We see ancient vessels of familiar types here, a blue and white porcelain Meiping, a jade rui scepter and a bamboo brush holder, a jade sounding stone hanging in an intricate wood frame, peacock tail feathers and a bronze yo vessel. These are easy to recognize. Proper object people can identify more. Next. Below, in one of the many boats, a group of musicians are playing instruments. From right to left they are some kind of sounding stones struck like chimes, a yuan, which is a shamisen-like plucked instrument, a sheng, or mouth organ, wooden clappers and a drum, a flute. A woman above prepares little plates of things to eat. Next. Among the famous artifacts produced at the Tiger Hill were mechanical dolls and automata. In my book I write, in chapter 67 of every traditional Chinese reader's favorite novel, Hong Lo Meng, The Dream of the Red Chamber, we can read a description of a group of these toys brought back for Baozhai by her brother from a trip to Suzhou. She gives a few of them to Lin Daiyu, to whom they bring on a severe attack of nostalgia for her home city. The novelties from Huqiushan, Tiger Hill, that are described include, quote, little mercury-filled automata who turn somersaults when you put them down on the floor or a table, automata with sand-filled cylindrical bodies whose arms and heads moved when you set the sand running, and lots of scenes from drama made up of tiny figures molded in colored clay, end quote. Where else than in this scroll, and one may hope in others of the kind still undiscovered, is this description in words matched with images. In a shop selling dolls, probably automata of this kind, notice the clock behind, The bespectacled artisan touches up the head of one of them. Next. A few more details quickly from this extraordinary pictorial document. A group of gentrywomen have taken their children with them for an outing in one of the boats. One is having her hair done, another holds a folding fan. We can be sure that our artist, Mr. X, I have to call him that because nobody thought well enough of him to record his name, Mr. X kept abreast of the fashions in women's garments and their patterns. Next. A boatwoman has positioned her boat beneath a bridge and looks upward, hoping that one of the men passing over will see her and engage her, or the other woman in the boat, who looks through the curtain at the other end. She is probably a prostitute waiting for a customer. In my book, I mistook her for a little boy.